I watched my father point to a hard plastic bench near the airport food court. "Just sit right here, Mama," he told my 78-year-old grandmother. "We are going to print the boarding passes and come right back." But the boarding passes were already on his phone. As my parents turned and walked directly toward the security checkpoint, abandoning a woman with early-stage Alzheimer's in the middle of Hartsfield Jackson Airport, my mother shoved a crumpled $100 bill into my chest. "Make sure she gets on the state facility van in an hour," she hissed. "Then go home." I ripped the bill in half. What I did next cost my parents everything. My name is Maya. I am 35 years old, and my family just learned the hard way that you never play financial games with a forensic accountant. Before I tell you how I systematically dismantled my parents' toxic empire, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe karma always collects its debts. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Atlanta, my family projected a flawless image of generational wealth and unshakable respectability. My father Jerome was a man who measured his self-worth by the logo on his golf clubs and the invitations he received to exclusive country club galas. My mother Brenda was his perfect counterpart, a woman who treated social status as a blood sport. They had carefully curated their lives to look like a magazine spread, but behind the heavy oak doors of our home, the reality was bitterly cold. I was always the outsider. While my younger sister Jasmine was treated like royalty given new cars and designer wardrobes for merely existing, I was the designated problem child. My crime was simply refusing to conform to their shallow expectations. They wanted a compliant daughter who married into money and smiled for holiday portraits. Instead, I became a forensic accountant. I spent my days dissecting financial records, uncovering fraud, and following the money trails that liars try so desperately to hide. My parents hated my career because they hated anyone who knew how to look beneath the surface. The sheer toxicity of our family dynamic reached a boiling point on a sweltering Tuesday morning in July. It was supposed to be a straightforward airport drop-off. Jerome and Brenda were flying to Jamaica to celebrate their 40th wedding anniversary in a luxury villa. Naturally, I was summoned to be their unpaid luggage mule hauling their heavy designer suitcases through the chaotic departure terminal. Jasmine was conveniently unavailable, claiming she had an urgent brunch meeting with her wealthy white husband Trevor and his country club friends. Jasmine always got a pass while I got the heavy lifting. Walking beside me was Grandma Ruby. She was the heart of our family, a proud, fiercely independent black woman who owned a sprawling 150-acre heritage farm down in South Georgia. The land had been in our family for generations, worked by our ancestors, and Ruby guarded it with her life. But over the past year, the cruel shadows of Alzheimer's had begun to creep into her mind. She still had moments of brilliant, sharp lucidity, but they were often followed by periods of quiet confusion. Today, she was dressed in her Sunday best, a lovely lavender suit she had picked out specifically for the trip. My parents had told her they were taking her to see the ocean. The terminal was a roaring sea of travelers rolling suitcases and blaring overhead announcements. Grandma Ruby gripped my elbow tightly, her steps slow but determined. We stopped near a bank of chairs adjacent to a busy coffee shop. "You stay right here," Mama Jerome said smoothly, adjusting the cuffs of his custom-tailored blazer. He did not look her in the eye, a classic tell of a liar. "Do not wander off. Brenda and I will go handle the ticketing and come right back." He gestured for me to follow them with the luggage. We walked about 50 feet away, putting a large glass partition between us and the bench where my grandmother sat patiently waiting. Suddenly, Brenda stopped. She adjusted her expensive silk scarf, checking her reflection in the glass, before turning a completely cold, dead gaze toward me. "Do not cause a scene like you did at Jasmine's wedding," she snapped, her voice low and venomous. She was referring to the time I refused to pull out my credit card to pay for the open bar, when Trevor's card embarrassingly declined in front of 200 guests. I had refused to bail them out, and they had never forgiven me. Brenda reached into her leather handbag, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and slapped it hard against my chest. "A state transport van is picking her up from door 4 in exactly 1 hour. she hissed. Make sure she gets on it, then take an Uber back to your little apartment. I stood frozen, the handles of the heavy suitcases slipping from my sweaty palms to hit the floor with a loud thud. What are you talking about? I demanded, my voice cracking with disbelief. Grandma is supposed to be going to the beach. We packed her bags. She has her swimsuit in her tote. Brenda rolled her eyes in profound irritation. Do you really think we are taking a woman with dementia to a five-star resort to ruin our anniversary? She is going to Oak Creek. It is a state facility. Your father finally signed the papers. We are tired of the burden. My blood turned to ice water. Oak Creek was notorious in our state, an underfunded, overcrowded facility that was essentially a dumping ground for the forgotten. She is your mother, I fired back, stepping into Jerome's personal space, ignoring the heavy scent of his expensive cologne. You cannot just leave her at an airport like a piece of lost luggage. She thinks she is going on vacation with her family. Jerome sneered, looking down at me with absolute contempt. Let the adults handle the business, Maya. You are just a glorified bookkeeper who likes to pry into things that do not concern you. You do not understand how real life works. Enjoy your weekend. Do not mess this up. Without another word, they turned their backs on me. I watched them merge into the fast-moving VIP lane toward the TSA security checkpoint, chatting casually, as if they had not just thrown away the matriarch of our family. I looked down at the $100 bill crushed in my fist. The pure audacity of thinking they could buy my silence for $100 sent a shockwave of pure adrenaline through my system. I tore the bill straight down the middle, letting the pieces flutter to the polished floor. I left their expensive luggage sitting right there in the middle of the busy walkway. Let airport security think it was an abandoned threat. I did not care. I spun around and sprinted back the way we came. I pushed past annoyed travelers dodging rolling carts and sprinting against the tide of foot traffic. My lungs burned, but all I could picture was Ruby sitting alone on that hard plastic bench in her lavender suit, waiting for a son who was never coming back. When I finally reached the seating area, my heart stopped. The bench was empty. Panic seized my throat. I frantically scanned the crowded food court, pushing past a line of people waiting for coffee. "Grandma Ruby!" I shouted, my voice desperate. I pushed through a group of tourists and finally spotted a flash of lavender near a security podium about 100 yards away. She was surrounded by 3 airport police officers. She was crying, her shoulders shaking as she clutched her small beaded purse tightly against her chest. I rushed over immediately, shoving my way past the officers. "That is my grandmother," I said breathlessly, wrapping my arms around her trembling shoulders. "I am taking her home right now." Before I could guide her away, a woman in a sharp gray suit stepped out from behind the officers. She wore a state ID badge clipped to her lapel and held a thick manila folder. Her expression was entirely devoid of sympathy, the face of someone executing a bureaucratic procedure. "I am afraid you cannot do that, ma'am," she said in a flat, monotone voice. I tightened my grip on Ruby. "Watch me. She is my grandmother, and my father had no right to leave her here." The woman opened the folder and pulled out a notarized legal document, thrusting it toward me. "I have a court-ordered power of attorney signed this morning by Jerome. Your grandmother is officially a ward of the state, and as of 9 a.m. today, all her physical and financial assets have been seized by the county for her ongoing care. You need to step away from my patient immediately, or I will have these officers arrest you for interference." The woman in the sharp gray suit taps her manicured fingernail against the thick manila folder, her expression entirely devoid of human sympathy. "I am calling airport security," she states flatly, pulling out a state-issued mobile phone. "You are interfering with a lawful state mandate. This power of attorney is legally binding, and you have no authority to override a transfer of guardianship." I do not blink. I step closer, positioning my body squarely between her and Grandma Ruby, who is trembling softly in her lavender Sunday suit. "Go ahead," I tell her, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy calm that cuts right through the roaring noise of the Atlanta airport terminal. "Call them right now. And while we wait for the officers to arrive, let us review the Georgia State Code regarding adult guardianship and elder abandonment." The social worker pauses, her finger hovering over the phone screen. I point directly on the forged document in her hands. That power of attorney lists Jerome as the primary agent responsible for this vulnerable adult. But the primary agent just physically abandoned his principal in a massive public transit hub. He is currently walking through the TSA security checkpoint to board a first-class flight to Montego Bay. He is not physically present to execute the legal transfer of custody to a state facility. If you take this woman by force right now, without the primary agent present to sign the intake release, you are actively facilitating an illegal seizure. You are becoming a direct accessory to elder abandonment. I watch her eyes dart down to the paperwork. She knows I am right. My parents think I am just a glorified bookkeeper, but I am a forensic accountant. I dismantle fraudulent corporate contracts and read legal fine print for a living before I even finish my morning coffee. If you lay a single hand on my grandmother, I continue projecting every ounce of professional authority I possess. I will personally name you your supervisor and your entire department in a massive federal lawsuit for gross negligence and unlawful detainment. Now step aside. The bureaucratic confidence completely shatters from her face. The threat of a massive personal liability lawsuit is the ultimate kryptonite for a state employee. She slowly lowers the folder and takes a deliberate step backward, signaling the airport police to stand down. I do not wait for her to change her mind or make a phone call to her superiors. I gently take Grandma Ruby by the arm, pick up her small floral tote bag, and guide her away from the gaping crowd, walking straight out into the suffocating, humid Georgia heat. The drive back to my apartment is agonizingly quiet. Grandma Ruby stares out the passenger window, her hands twisting the gold clasp of her beaded purse over and over. When I finally get her inside my place, I settle her onto my velvet sofa, drape a soft blanket over her shoulders, and head to the kitchen to brew a warm cup of chamomile tea to calm her nerves. As I walk back into the living room and hand her the ceramic mug, her trembling fingers suddenly shoot out and lock around my wrist with surprising desperate strength. The cloudy, confused haze in her eyes vanishes entirely, replaced by a sharp, piercing clarity that catches me completely off guard. Maya, she says, her voice steady, low, and commanding. Did your father take the farm money again? The question hits me right in the chest, knocking the wind out of me. The farm money. The specific phrasing yanks me violently back 10 years to the day I sat in my university financial aid office, staring in absolute horror at a computer screen that showed my $50,000 college savings account completely wiped out. My father had drained the entire account overnight without saying a single word to me. When I drove home and confronted him in his plush home office, he did not even have the decency to look ashamed or apologize. He casually poured himself a glass of expensive bourbon and told me that Jasmine needed emergency capital to save her failing luxury fashion boutique. He said since I was the smart daughter, I could easily figure out how to secure student loans to finish my degree. I spent the next decade drowning in soul-crushing debt, working double shifts, while Jasmine flaunted designer handbags bought with my stolen tuition money. My father had always viewed other people's money as his personal slush fund. I kneel on the hardwood floor in front of Grandma Ruby, keeping my voice gentle but resolute. I do not know yet, Grandma, but I am going to find out. I promise you that. She slowly releases my wrist, her gaze drifting back toward the window as the heavy Alzheimer's fog rolls back into her mind, pulling her away from me once more. I stand up, my blood running hot with a familiar, dangerous focus. I walk straight to my kitchen island, crack my knuckles, and open my laptop. My parents truly believe I am just a quiet, obedient number cruncher who balances boring ledgers for corporate clients. They have absolutely no idea what my actual skill set entails. I do not just balance books. I hunt financial predators. I expose offshore tax havens, dismantle complex shell companies, and drag hidden stolen assets out into the unforgiving light of day. And tonight, my target is my own blood. I boot up my heavily encrypted forensic investigation software and start running specialized queries. I bypass the standard consumer banking portals and dig straight into the deep financial databases I use for high-level corporate litigation. First, I target Ruby's primary banking institution. I have her social security number, and the account routing details memorized from when I helped her file her property taxes 3 years ago. The screen flashes blue as the security firewall authenticates my credentials and grants me access. I pull up the transaction history for her primary checking and her high-yield savings accounts. My eyes scan the digital ledgers watching the money flow over the past 12 months. It is an absolute slaughter. 6 months ago, her life savings sat at a very comfortable $412,000. It was a lifetime of hard work, harvesting pecans, managing crops, and saving every single dime to ensure she could pass her legacy down to the next generation. But starting in late February, massive wire transfers began hemorrhaging from the account. $50,000 routed to an offshore holding company. $80,000 wired directly to a luxury auto dealership in downtown Atlanta. Countless $10,000 withdrawals marked simply as miscellaneous consulting expenses. I track the digital footprints tracing the routing numbers right past the fake dummy accounts. The money trails lead directly into the personal checking accounts of my sister Jasmine and my father Jerome. They had been bleeding an old, sick woman dry for half a year to fund their extravagant country club lifestyle. I scroll rapidly down to the bottom line of the bank statement. The current available balance flashes on my screen in bold red numbers. $0.00. They took everything. Every last penny she had to her name. My chest tightens with white-hot fury, but the professional instinct kicks in immediately, overriding the panic. If they drained the liquid cash, what about the hard assets? What about the land? My fingers fly across the keyboard, accessing the Georgia State Property Registry. I pull up the specific parcel identification number for the 150-acre heritage farm, the sacred land our ancestors bled and died for. The database spins, retrieving the latest legal filings and property deeds. I hit enter on the final query. The document loads onto my screen, and all the air leaves my lungs. There is a pending deed transfer filed just 48 hours ago. The legal document officially lists Jerome as the acting power of attorney, authorizing the total commercial sale of the entire farm. But the buyer is not an independent third party or a random agricultural company. The receiving entity is listed as Pinnacle Developments. I know that name perfectly well. It is the commercial real estate firm owned by Trevor Jasmine's arrogant, sleazy husband. They did not just abandon my grandmother to rot in a terrible state ward because she was inconvenient. They strategically coordinated a hostile, illegal takeover of her entire legacy so Trevor could bulldoze a century of our family history to build a luxury golf resort for his own profit. My parents sold our bloodline to keep up appearances, and they thought I was too blind and too weak to stop them. I slam my laptop shut, grab my car keys from the counter, and look over at Ruby. She is dozing peacefully on the couch, completely unaware that her own flesh and blood just sold the home she was born in right out from under her. I walk over and gently grab her coat. We are not waiting around for a court date or calling the police to file a slow-moving report. We are driving to Georgia right now. The tires of my car tear down the southbound interstate. The silence inside the cabin feels incredibly heavy. It is broken only by the hum of the engine and the soft rhythm of Grandma Ruby breathing in the passenger seat. We are heading deep into the Georgia countryside. We are driving away from the glass and steel of Atlanta and moving into the red dirt and towering pines that define our family bloodline. This farm is not just dirt and timber. It is 150 acres of heritage. It was bought and paid for by my great-grandfather with sweat and survival. It is the only thing in this world that truly belongs to us. And my father just sold it to a man who views our history as nothing more than a blank check. Grandma Ruby stirs in her seat. She looks out the window as the familiar landscape rolls past. The fog of her illness seems to lift slightly when she smells the sweet pine air. She does not know the full extent of the betrayal yet, but her intuition is sharper than my parents ever realized. I keep my hands gripped tightly on the steering wheel. I am running through every financial regulation and property law I have memorized over my 10-year career. My parents think I am just a quiet bookkeeper. They have no idea that I dismantle fraudulent corporate contracts and hunt financial predators for a living. Today, my target is my own brother-in-law. As I turn my car onto the familiar gravel driveway, a thick cloud of red dust kicks up into the humid afternoon air. The sprawling green pastures where Ruby used to grow peaches and pecans come into view. But the peaceful sanctuary of my childhood is completely gone. My stomach twists into a hard knot. 3 massive yellow bulldozers are idling near the edge of the property line. A crew of men in hard hats and neon vests are pounding wooden surveying stakes into the sacred ground near the old barn. Standing right in the middle of the chaos is Trevor. He is pointing a rolled-up blueprint like a weapon. He is wearing a crisp pastel polo shirt and leather loafers, looking entirely out of place in the Georgia heat. Standing next to him is my younger sister Jasmine. She is holding a custom iced coffee and wearing a pair of $1,000 designer sunglasses. Her pristine white linen trousers are catching the red dust, but she does not seem to care. Why would she care? That entire outfit was paid for by the $400,000 they siphoned out of our grandmother and her retirement accounts. I slam the car into park and step out into the stifling heat. I do not shout. I do not run. I walk with deliberate and measured steps toward the surveying crew. Grandma Ruby steps out behind me. Her eyes widen in distress at the sight of the heavy machinery tearing up her front lawn. Maya, Jasmine calls out. She lowers her sunglasses. Her voice drips with a mixture of annoyance and superiority. What are you doing here? You are supposed to be putting her on the state transport van. Did you ruin Mom and Dad and their vacation just to come down here and throw a tantrum? I ignore my sister completely and walk straight up to Trevor. Call off your crew, I tell him. My voice is dangerously calm. You are trespassing on private property. Trevor laughs. It is a loud and grating sound that makes my skin crawl. He signals the foreman to keep working and steps into my path, trying to tower over me. He pulls a folded document from his back pocket and aggressively shakes it in my face. I am not trespassing, Maya, he says. His lips curl into a condescending smirk. I am the new legal owner. Your father signed the power of attorney over to me this morning. The deed transfer is being processed as we speak. We are breaking ground on the new clubhouse on Monday. He looks past me. His gaze sweeps over the rolling green hills and the ancient oak trees with pure corporate greed. This is prime real estate, he continues. He adopts a sickeningly paternalistic tone. I am actually doing your family a massive favor here. This land has just been sitting here rotting. Your people do not know how to monetize acreage anyway. You let pride get in the way of profit. I am going to turn this dirt into a premier luxury golf resort. You should be thanking me. I am bringing real wealth into this family. Jasmine steps up next to him. She loops her arm through his and glares at me. Seriously, Maya, you are embarrassing yourself. You are just a broke, jealous spinster who wants a piece of the pie. You have always hated that I married a successful developer while you are stuck crunching numbers in a cubicle. Trevor is building an empire. You should go back to your little apartment and let the successful people handle the family assets. I look at my sister. I look at her glowing skin, her perfect blowout, and the heavy diamond tennis bracelet sparkling on her wrist. Then I look at the man she claims is building an empire. As a forensic accountant, I am trained to spot inconsistencies. People lie, but assets always tell the truth. An empire, I repeat. I let the word hang in the humid air. I tilt my head and look directly at the wrist of my brother-in-law. That is a fascinating word choice for a man wearing a counterfeit luxury watch. Trevor loses his smile. He instinctively pulls his arm back, but I step forward. I refuse to let him retreat. A real luxury watch has a sweeping second hand, I tell him. My voice is loud enough for the surveying crew to hear. Yours is ticking, which means it has a cheap battery movement. And that brand new luxury vehicle you are driving. I point to the black vehicle parked near the porch. It has fleet registration plates. You did not buy it. You leased it under a corporate account that is currently 90 days past due. Jasmine drops her arm from Trevor. Her face flashes with confusion. What are you talking about? She demands. Trevor just closed a massive deal in the city. I keep my eyes locked on Trevor. I watch the arrogant flush drain out of his face. It is replaced by a sickly and pale panic. He did not close anything I say to my sister. I spent the last 2 hours tearing through public financial filings. His primary development company has 3 active tax liens. His corporate accounts are overdrawn. His subcontractors are suing him for unpaid wages. He is not a successful developer. He is drowning in millions of dollars of toxic debt. He is about to face involuntary bankruptcy. I take another step closer to Trevor. I drop my voice to a lethal register. You do not want to build a golf resort. You do not even have the capital to pour the concrete. You are trying to steal the farm of my grandmother so you can liquidate the land. You want to use the cash to pay off your desperate creditors before they drag you into federal court, and you used my father to facilitate the theft. Jasmine turns to her husband. Her designer sunglasses slip down her nose. Trevor, tell me she is lying. Tell me you did not use the money Mom and Dad gave us to pay off your business debts. Trevor twists his face into a mask of pure and unadulterated rage. His fragile ego is built entirely on a foundation of white savior superiority and fake wealth. That foundation shatters right there in the Georgia dirt. A black woman he thought was nothing more than an obedient paper pusher just publicly humiliated him. I exposed his entire fraudulent existence in front of his wife and his hired crew. He turns bright red. The veins in his neck bulge. Shut your mouth, he spits. He steps aggressively toward me. You do not know anything about my business. You are just a pathetic and lonely woman trying to ruin the only good thing this family has. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out another piece of paper. He waves it frantically. I knew you would try to pull some kind of stunt like this. That is why your father and I went to the judge yesterday. I know the judge he is talking about. He is a notoriously corrupt local magistrate who frequently plays golf with my father at their exclusive country club. Trevor unfolds the paper and shoves it toward me. It is an emergency eviction notice. It is stamped and signed by the judge. It grants Trevor the immediate authority to remove any unauthorized individuals from the premises. This land belongs to my company now, Trevor shouts. His voice echoes off the side of the old farmhouse. You and this senile old woman are trespassing. He does not wait for me to read the document. He raises his hand and snaps his fingers loudly. 2 massive private security guards step out from behind his vehicle. They are built like linebackers and wear tactical vests. They march directly toward me and Grandma Ruby. Their expressions are hardened and ready for violence. Remove them, Trevor orders. He points a shaking finger at us. Throw them off my property right now. If they resist, call the local sheriff and have them arrested for criminal trespassing. Do whatever it takes to get this trash off my land. The 2 security guards do not hesitate. They lunge forward, their heavy boots crunching violently against the gravel driveway. The taller one reaches out and grabs my upper arms with a brutal, bruising grip. His fingers dig into my flesh as he yanks me backward. I immediately twist my body, throwing myself between him and Grandma Ruby to shield her from the impact. The sudden force of his momentum sends me pitching backward over the uneven ground. I hit the Georgia red clay hard. The rough dirt tears straight through the fabric of my professional suit jacket and rips the skin off both of my knees. A sharp, stinging pain shoots up my legs, but I refuse to make a single sound. I will not give them the satisfaction of hearing me cry out on my own ancestral land. From the top of the wraparound porch, the exact porch where my grandfather used to sit and peel peaches on summer afternoons, Jasmine lets out a sharp, mocking laugh. She leans against the wooden railing, casually swirling the ice in her designer tumbler. Throw the trash out, Trevor, she calls down, taking a slow, deliberate sip of her sweet tea. And make sure they do not scratch the least SUV on their way off our property. She looks at me bleeding in the dirt and scoffs. You really thought you could come down here and stop this, Maya? Mom and Dad already signed the papers. This place is finally going to be worth something. Every instinct in my body screams at me to get up and fight. I want to march up those wooden steps, snatch that glass out of her hand, and wipe that smug, entitled smile right off her face. The anger burns white-hot in my chest, demanding immediate physical retaliation. But the cold, calculating part of my brain instantly overrides the rage. If I swing at these guards, I will be arrested for assault. I will be sitting in a county jail cell by nightfall, while Trevor and Jasmine toss Grandma Ruby into a neglected state ward and bulldoze this entire farm into dust. I cannot protect my grandmother from behind bars. I have to play the long game. I have to fight them where they are weakest. I push myself up from the dirt, ignoring the blood trickling down my shins and staining my torn stockings. I gently wrap my arm around Ruby, pulling her close and guiding her safely away from the massive treaded tires of the idling bulldozers. As I move, my eyes lock onto the security personnel and the contracting crew. I do not just look at them, I systematically memorize them. I mentally log the badge number pinned to the taller guard's tactical vest. I scan the side of the surveyor trucks, parked near the old barn, committing the company logos, the license plate numbers, and the Department of Transportation registration decals entirely to memory. My mind works like a steel trap, cataloging every single detail. I know exactly how to track their corporate liability insurance and their employment records. I am building a comprehensive list of defendants for a massive federal lawsuit, and every single person standing on this property is going to pay. I walk over to the passenger side of my car, open the door, and carefully help Ruby into her seat. I buckle her in, ensuring she is comfortable and safe from the chaos outside. Then I walk around the front of the vehicle to the driver's side. Before I open my door, I stop. I look up at the porch and lock eyes directly with my sister. The smug satisfaction on Jasmine's face falters for just a fraction of a second as she meets my unwavering gaze. I do not yell. I do not scream. I pitch my voice with absolute lethal certainty. Enjoy that iced tea, Jasmine, I tell her, the words slicing through the heavy, humid air. Enjoy the designer clothes and the country club lunches. Because I promise you, by the time I am done dismantling your husband's fraudulent business and tracking the stolen funds you have been spending, you are going to lose every single thing you own. You are going to be stripped down to absolute nothing. Jasmine opens her mouth to snap back, but no words come out. I slide into the driver's seat, slam the door shut, and throw the car into reverse. I spin the steering wheel hard, pressing my foot on the gas. The tires squeal against the dirt, kicking up a massive blinding cloud of red dust that blows straight over Trevor and his cheap suit, leaving them coughing and waving their arms in the driveway. I speed down the long rural road, putting significant distance between us and the heavy machinery poised to destroy our history. Ruby reaches across the center console and pats my arm with her trembling hand. "We are going to be all right, Maya," she whispers, her voice remarkably clear and steady. I nod, keeping my eyes on the road ahead while squeezing her hand tightly. "We are going to be more than all right, Grandma. We are going to destroy them." I drive 5 miles down the state highway until I spot a dingy neon-lit diner sitting completely empty on the side of the road. The faded sign flickers against the darkening afternoon sky. I pull into the cracked asphalt parking lot, put the car in park, and leave the engine running to keep the air conditioning blowing cool air for Ruby. I pull my phone from my pocket. My screen is lit up with threatening text messages rolling in from my parents demanding to know where I took their mother and threatening to call the police. I swipe the notifications away without reading them. They do not matter anymore. I open my contact list and find the exact number I need. Elias. He is a ruthless shark-like family law attorney based in Atlanta. He is the kind of lawyer who destroys corporate empires for sport and leaves opposing counsel sweating in the courtroom. 2 years ago, my forensic audit saved his most lucrative corporate client from a devastating multi-million-dollar embezzlement scandal. I handed him the financial proof on a silver platter, and he owes me a massive favor. I am collecting it right now. I tap his name and put the phone to my ear. The line rings twice before he picks up. "Maya," he says, his deep voice sounding surprised. "This is an unexpected call." I do not bother with pleasantries or small talk. "Elias, I need you to pull up your drafting software immediately," I tell him. "I need you to freeze a multi-million-dollar land development. Tonight." Elias does not ask questions. He simply gives me an address for his downtown Atlanta office and tells me the security guard will let me up. I hang up the phone, put my car in drive, and speed away from the neon lights of the diner. I need to get Grandma Ruby to a safe place before I can start tearing down Trevor's paper empire. I take her to my best friend Sarah's apartment, a secure high-rise building where my family would never think to look. Sarah takes one look at my scraped knees and Ruby's exhausted face and immediately ushers us inside, promising to keep the door deadbolted until I return. By the time I step out of the elevator onto the top floor of Elias's corporate law firm, it is completely dark outside. The city skyline glows through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of his corner suite. Elias is waiting for me. He has discarded his suit jacket, his sleeves are rolled up to his elbows, and a fresh pot of black coffee is steaming on his massive mahogany desk. He points to a leather chair opposite him. I drop my heavy leather bag onto the desk, pull out my laptop, and slap a thick stack of printed banking ledgers down right in front of him. These are the initial breadcrumbs I pulled from Ruby's accounts before I left my apartment. I tell him, sitting down and opening my screen. My father Jerome and his son-in-law Trevor used a forged power of attorney to drain over $400,000 in liquid cash before moving to seize the physical property. Elias leans forward, his dark eyes scanning the top sheet of the banking transfers. "Let us see exactly how stupid they are," he murmurs, sliding a yellow legal pad closer to him. "Break it down for me, Maya. Show me the money." My fingers fly across my keyboard as I bring up the deep financial tracking software I use to dismantle corporate fraud. I project my screen onto the large monitor mounted on the wall of his office, so Elias can follow every move I make. We start with the massive wire transfers that drained my grandmother's life savings. They tried to be clever by bouncing the funds through a series of shell companies, but they underestimated who they were dealing with. They used basic layering techniques that any first-year forensic accountant could spot. "Look at this first transfer," I say, pointing to a $50,000 wire sent in late February. It goes to an LLC registered in Delaware. The registered agent is a corporate proxy service, but if you cross-reference the corporate filing fees paid to the state, the credit card used belongs to Pinnacle Developments. That is Trevor's commercial real estate firm. They funneled the cash straight from Ruby's high-yield savings into Trevor's corporate holding account. Elias types rapidly on his own laptop, pulling up the state registry for Pinnacle Developments. "And what exactly is Pinnacle funding with this stolen cash?" he asks, narrowing his eyes at the screen. "That is where it gets interesting," I reply. "I run a secondary trace on the outgoing funds from Pinnacle Developments. The money did not go toward construction materials, land surveys, or payroll for his supposed empire." I pull up a series of massive sequential payments routed to offshore clearinghouses. Trevor is not a real estate mogul. He is a degenerate gambler. These wire transfers match the routing protocols for high-stakes online sports betting syndicates and offshore casinos. He lost $80,000 in a single weekend in March. He was hemorrhaging cash to bookies and using my grandmother's retirement fund to cover his massive losses so his creditors would not break his legs. Elias lets out a low whistle, shaking his head in absolute disgust. "He was drowning in gambling debt, so he convinced your father to help him steal from a woman with Alzheimer's. What about the rest of the money? There is still over $300,000 unaccounted for." I switch to the next set of transactions. I feel a sickening twist in my stomach as the data populates on the screen. "The rest of it stayed local," I tell him, my voice turning bitter. I highlight a steady stream of $10,000 and $15,000 payments moving from the dummy LLCs directly into a joint checking account shared by Trevor and Jasmine. From there, the money flows out like water. $30,000 to a luxury car dealership in Buckhead to keep the lease current on Jasmine's SUV. $15,000 to clear out a maxed-out American Express card completely filled with charges from designer boutiques in Paris and Milan. Another $20,000 wired to the country club to prepay their exclusive membership dues for the next 2 years. They did not just steal to cover Trevor's gambling debts. They stole to maintain their fake, glamorous lifestyle. They were posting photos on social media, bragging about their wealth and success, while actively bleeding a sick elderly woman dry just to keep up appearances. Jasmine was walking around with a $10,000 handbag bought with the exact money meant to pay for Ruby's in-home nursing care. Elias sits back in his chair, rubbing his jaw, as he processes the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. I have seen a lot of toxic family dynamics in my career, Maya, he says quietly. But this is a special breed of ruthless. They sold out their own blood to buy designer shoes and cover casino markers. What makes them hate you so much that they did not even try to loop you into the cover-up or buy your silence early on? Why are you the designated enemy in this family? I look away from the glowing screen, staring out at the dark Atlanta skyline. The painful memories from 5 years ago rise to the surface, sharp and unforgiving. Because I am the only one who cannot be bought, I tell him, my voice hardening. 5 years ago, Jerome was desperate to secure a massive commercial line of credit to maintain his status as a premium investor at his country club. His business was struggling, but he needed to look like a kingmaker. He brought me forged financial statements and inflated property appraisals. He wanted me to use my professional credentials to co-sign the fraudulent loan applications. He told me it was my duty to protect the family name. I turned back to look Elias dead in the eyes. I refused. I told him I would rather lose the family name than lose my integrity and my license. I threatened to report the falsified documents to the State Banking Commission if he ever tried to submit them. He had to withdraw the application and suffer the ultimate humiliation of being downgraded at his precious club. From that day forward, I was dead to them. I chose the law and my own moral compass over their toxic country club status, and that instantly made me the family pariah. They hate me because my very existence is a constant reminder of everything they lack. Elias nods slowly, a fierce, predatory smile spreading across his face. Well, he murmurs, their greatest mistake was making an enemy out of the only person smart enough to take them down. He turns his attention entirely to his proprietary legal database, cracking his knuckles as he prepares to go to war. Let us see exactly how deep this real estate scam goes, he says, his fingers moving furiously over the keys. I am pulling the current municipal dockets for the county where the farm is located. If Trevor filed that emergency eviction notice today, there will be a digital trail of his development permits. The silence in the office stretches out for several minutes, broken only by the rapid clicking of his keyboard. I watch the reflection of the computer screen in the glass window, waiting for the final piece of the puzzle to fall into place. Suddenly, Elias stops typing. The color drains completely out of his face. He stares at the monitor, his jaw tight. Maya, he says, his voice losing its confident edge. He turns the large monitor around so it faces me directly. You need to look at this right now. I lean over the desk, my eyes scanning the heavily redacted court filings and municipal development contracts he just pulled from the county server. The numbers and legal jargon jump out at me, forming a horrifying picture of what Trevor has actually done. Trevor did not just seize the land to build a luxury golf resort in the future. He never had the capital or the intention to develop that property himself. He used the forged power of attorney to claim legal ownership of the 150 acres, and then he immediately turned around and sold the commercial development rights to a massive international conglomerate. The contract is sitting right there on the screen. He pre-sold our ancestral home to a foreign holdings group for $5 million in pure cash. The $5 million is currently sitting in a temporary escrow account, waiting for the land to be cleared of all existing structures before the funds are officially released to Pinnacle Developments. But that is not the most terrifying detail. I scroll down to the bottom of the municipal filing, my heart hammering violently against my ribs. There is a secondary permit attached to the land sale. It is a fully approved expedited demolition order signed by the same corrupt local judge who issued our eviction notice. The bulldozers we saw idling on the property this afternoon were not just conducting preliminary land surveys. They are actively staging for a complete teardown. The demolition permits are activated. The original farmhouse, the physical anchor of Ruby's legacy, the home built by the blood and sweat of my ancestors, is scheduled to be completely leveled in exactly 48 hours. Elias pushes his chair away from his massive mahogany desk and rubs both hands over his face, letting out a harsh, frustrated breath. He explains the brutal, unforgiving reality of local county politics. 48 hours is a death sentence for my grandmother's farmhouse. He tells me that if we file a standard emergency injunction in the local municipal court, it will land directly on the desk of Judge Caldwell, the exact same corrupt magistrate who signed Trevor's emergency eviction notice this afternoon. Caldwell will simply bury our filing in administrative red tape. He will claim a clerical error delay the hearing until Monday morning, and by the time we finally get a valid court order to halt the construction, Trevor's bulldozers will have already reduced our family legacy to a pile of splintered wood and crushed brick. The Good Old Boy network in that specific county is designed to protect men like Trevor and my father. Elias looks at me, his eyes dark with professional defeat, stating that we simply do not have the time to fight a rigged local system before the demolition crew strikes. I look at the digital clock glowing on his computer screen. It is 12:45 a.m. I do not panic. My heart rate does not spike. Instead, a slow, deep sense of absolute victory settles into my chest. I reach down into my heavy leather bag resting on the floor. My fingers brush past my forensic accounting manuals and close around a thick, rigid manila envelope. I pull the envelope out and toss it onto the center of his desk. It hits the polished wood with a heavy, satisfying thud. I look at Elias, allowing a cold, razor-sharp smile to form on my lips. We are not filing anything in county court, I tell him. We do not need the permission of a corrupt local magistrate to save my grandmother's farm. Elias frowns, eyeing the heavy package. What is this, Maya? I instruct him to open it. He breaks the wax seal and slides out a thick stack of pristine, watermarked legal documents bearing the official embossed seal of the United States Department of the Interior. I lean back in my chair, folding my arms across my chest. A year ago, I explained, my voice ringing with steady authority right after Grandma Ruby received her official Alzheimer's diagnosis. She experienced a period of terrifying crystal-clear lucidity. She knew exactly what her disease meant. More importantly, she knew exactly who her son was. Ruby knew that the moment her mind began to slip, Jerome would view her heritage farm as a convenient piggy bank to fund his country club lifestyle. She knew he would try to sell the land out from under her. Elias is rapidly scanning the documents, his eyes growing wider with every paragraph he reads. So I continue, Ruby, and I took a quiet, highly confidential road trip to Washington, D.C. We met with a senior federal historian and a specialized property rights attorney. We brought the original deed from my great-grandfather, a man who bought that land with blood and sweat, just decades after emancipation. We provided soil samples, agricultural records, and architectural blueprints of the original untouched farmhouse. We bypassed the local county completely and placed the entire 150 acres into a federal Black Heritage Trust. Elias looks up, absolute shock and fierce admiration warring on his face. The property is legally designated as a protected National Historical Site, I state, dropping the hammer. The soil, the ancient oak trees, the farmhouse, every single inch of that property is locked behind federal protection. It cannot be subdivided. It cannot be commercially developed. And it absolutely cannot be sold to a private corporate entity without an act of Congress or a heavily scrutinized federal override. The local judge who signed Trevor's eviction notice has absolutely zero jurisdiction over federal land. His signature is worth less than the ink it was printed with. Elias lets out a sharp, incredulous laugh. He drops the documents onto his desk and looks back at the computer monitor displaying Trevor's $5 million pre-sale contract. The legal reality of the situation hits the room like a shockwave. Maya, Elias says, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Trevor did not just execute a fraudulent local real estate deal. By utilizing a forged power of attorney to facilitate the commercial sale of a federally protected heritage site across state lines to an international conglomerate, he has crossed a massive legal threshold. I nod, my smile turning lethal. I know. Elias stands up, pacing behind his desk, the adrenaline of a shark smelling blood in the water taking over. He accepted a $5 million wire transfer into a corporate escrow account based on a fraudulent claim of ownership over federal land. Elias continues mapping out the charges. That is massive multi-count federal wire fraud. It is interstate commerce manipulation. It is the illegal sale of protected national assets. This is not a civil dispute anymore. This is a federal crime. The FBI will have jurisdiction. The SEC will investigate the wire transfers. Trevor is not just looking at bankruptcy, he is looking at decades in a federal penitentiary. And Jasmine I add smoothly accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars of those stolen funds directly into her joint checking account. She used stolen money to buy designer clothes and pay country club dues. She is legally an accessory to federal fraud and money laundering. When the feds seize Trevor's assets, they are going to seize everything with her name on it too. Her cars, her jewelry, her bank accounts. They are going to freeze it all. Elias stops pacing. He looks at me with absolute reverence. You built a guillotine, and you just let them walk right into it. I did not force them to steal, I reply coldly. I just made sure that when they finally showed their true colors, there would be no escape. Now let us draft the injunction. We abandon the local county forms and immediately pull up the federal templates. We are drafting an emergency federal injunction to present to the district court judge at dawn. We attach the banking ledgers, proving the initial theft. The forged power of attorney Trevor's $5 million pre-sale contract with the international conglomerate and the ironclad Federal Black Heritage Trust documentation. It is a flawless, inescapable legal trap. We are creating a document that will instantly freeze Trevor's escrow accounts, halt the demolition orders, and trigger an immediate federal investigation into Pinnacle developments. The hours blur together as we work with relentless surgical precision. The city outside the glass windows remains dark, but the air inside the office is charged with the electric thrill of impending justice. We are proofreading the final page of the federal filing. Elias is formatting the exhibits, preparing to submit the electronic docket the exact second the federal courthouse opens. We have them, Elias says, hitting the save button. The federal judge will grant this injunction immediately. The bulldozers will be impounded by federal marshals before noon. I reach for my coffee mug, feeling the first wave of physical exhaustion trying to catch up with my adrenaline. But before I can take a sip, the harsh, jarring ring of my cell phone shatters the quiet focus of the room. I look at the screen. The caller ID displays the name of Mrs. Gable, my 72-year-old neighbor, who lives in the apartment directly across the hall from me. She is a sweet, observant woman who baked me cookies when I first moved in. It is nearly 3 in the morning. She would never call me at this hour unless it was an absolute emergency. I answer the call. Mrs. Gable, is everything okay? Maya, her voice comes through the speaker in a terrified, trembling whisper. She sounds like she is hiding. Maya, please tell me you are not inside your apartment. I stand up instantly, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Elias snaps his head up, recognizing the shift in my tone. I am not home, I tell her quickly. What is happening? There are police officers in the hallway, she whispers frantically. 4 of them. They are wearing heavy tactical gear. They just bypassed your electronic lock and they are actively kicking in your front door. The blood drains from my face. My fingers tighten around the phone. Are you sure they are police? They have badges and weapons, Maya, she cries softly. They are shouting that they have a warrant. They are inside your place right now, tearing everything apart. What is going on? I end the call, the dial tone ringing in my ear like an alarm. Trevor and Jerome did not just rely on the corrupt local judge to evict me from the farm. They used their political connections to launch a direct physical strike against my home while I was busy dismantling their empire. The federal injunction is ready, but the war has just breached my front door. Elias and I rush out of his downtown office building. The night air in Atlanta is thick and heavy, carrying the distinct smell of impending rain. We do not waste a single second. We jump into my car, and I speed directly toward my best friend Sarah's high-rise apartment to retrieve Grandma Ruby. I refuse to leave my grandmother out of my sight for another moment, knowing that Trevor and my parents are actively mobilizing against us. Sarah meets us in the lobby, holding Ruby by the arm. Ruby looks exhausted, her lavender suit wrinkled, but she is safe. I thank Sarah, quickly buckle Ruby into the back seat, and speed toward my own apartment complex on the north side of the city. My mind is racing a mile a minute. I know my parents. They are not the type to retreat when they are cornered. Trevor must have called them in a blind panic the moment I left the farm, warning them that their supposedly compliant, boring daughter had just exposed his impending bankruptcy and frozen his multi-million-dollar corporate payday. They would not take that lying down. As I turn the corner onto my street, my stomach drops. 3 police cruisers are parked erratically in front of my apartment building. Their red and blue emergency lights flash brightly against the brick exterior, casting harsh shadows across the landscaping. I slam the car into park. Elias steps out, adjusting his suit jacket, his expression shifting into the cold, calculating mask of a ruthless litigator preparing for battle. We walk briskly through the lobby and step into the elevator, keeping Ruby safely between us. The elevator doors slide open on my floor, and the scene before me makes the blood boil in my veins. My apartment door, the heavy wooden door to my private sanctuary, is splintered and hanging off its hinges. They kicked it in. Inside my living room, 2 uniformed police officers are actively tossing my belongings, searching for something. Standing in the hallway, flanked by a 3rd police officer and a stern-looking adult protective services worker, are my parents. Jerome and Brenda are standing right outside my destroyed door. They cut their luxury Jamaican anniversary trip short and flew back on the first available flight. Jerome is wearing a tailored linen vacation shirt, and Brenda has a silk designer wrap draped elegantly over her shoulders. They look like they just stepped off a yacht standing amidst the destruction of my home. The absolute second Brenda sees me stepping out of the elevator, she launches into a theatrical performance that is truly sickening to witness. She lets out a sharp, piercing wail that echoes down the entire corridor. She rushes toward the nearest police officer and clutches his uniform sleeve. "There she is!" Brenda cries, her voice trembling with perfectly manufactured terror. She points a shaking finger directly at my chest, forcing crocodile tears to stream down her perfectly powdered cheeks. "That is our daughter. She is completely unhinged and financially desperate. She kidnapped my sick mother-in-law from the airport terminal yesterday morning. She took a vulnerable woman with dementia just to extort us for money. She is demanding a ransom and trying to sabotage our family." The officers inside my apartment immediately step out into the hallway, their hands dropping to rest heavily on their utility belts. The APS worker glares at me with absolute unfiltered disgust, clutching her clipboard to her chest. The lead police officer, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a tight jaw, pulls a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. The metallic clinking sound is sharp and menacing. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," the officer orders me, his voice booming with authority. "You are under arrest for the kidnapping and abduction of a vulnerable elder, as well as suspected extortion. Do not resist." Elias instantly steps forward, his tall frame blocking the officer. His lawyer instincts flare to life, ready to tear the officer apart on procedural grounds. But I reach out and place a firm hand on Elias's arm, signaling him to stop. I am not going to fight physical force with physical force. I am going to let my parents dig their own graves right here in the hallway. Jerome sees the officer stepping toward me with the handcuffs and assumes he has won the war. His massive ego simply cannot resist the urge to gloat. He steps forward, bypassing the APS worker, and invades my personal space. He leans his head down, putting his face mere inches from my ear. I can smell the stale airplane coffee and the expensive scotch on his breath. "You are a nobody, Maya Jerome," whispers his voice dripping with venomous, unchecked arrogance. "You always were. You thought you could play in the big leagues, but you are completely out of your depth. You are just a pathetic spinster who plays with calculators. Let the adults handle the family business from here on out, or I will personally make sure you see the inside of a state penitentiary for the rest of your miserable life." I do not flinch. I do not back away from his toxic breath. I stare directly into his cold, calculating eyes and allow a slow, victorious smile to spread across my face. "Officer," I say, my voice ringing out with absolute, undeniable authority that stops the cop right in his tracks. "Before you put those cuffs on my wrists and execute a completely baseless arrest, I highly suggest you review this footage. Otherwise, my attorney standing right here will be adding wrongful arrest, false imprisonment, and severe police misconduct to the massive federal lawsuit we are filing at dawn." I reach into the inner pocket of my torn suit jacket and pull out my smartphone. As a forensic accountant who regularly investigates complex corporate transit fraud and logistics embezzlement, I have top-tier security contacts embedded in major transit hubs. I cashed in a massive professional favor 3 hours ago. I turn the screen around and hold it up for the lead officer, the APS worker, and Elias to see. I hit play. The screen lights up with crisp, high-definition security footage from the Hartsfield Jackson departure terminal, complete with a verified digital timestamp from yesterday morning. The video tells the absolute undeniable truth. It clearly shows Jerome and Brenda leading Grandma Ruby to a hard plastic bench near the food court. It captures the exact moment Jerome points a commanding finger at her, instructing her to stay put. The high-definition camera tracks them as they turn their backs on the elderly woman. They do not look frantic. They do not look like concerned family members. They are laughing. The footage clearly shows Brenda adjusting her expensive silk scarf and checking her reflection in the glass partition before the two of them casually merge directly into the VIP TSA security line. The video continues for 10 agonizing minutes, showing Grandma Ruby sitting entirely alone in the massive, roaring crowd, completely abandoned by the people claiming I kidnapped her. The hallway goes dead silent. The lead officer watches the entire video without blinking. He looks at the digital timestamp on the footage, and then he slowly turns his head to look directly at Jerome and Brenda. The disgust on his face is immediate, visceral, and profound. He slowly slides the steel handcuffs back into his utility pouch, his jaw clenching in anger. He realizes instantly that he was weaponized to execute a false arrest. The APS worker drops her pen. She stares at my parents in absolute horror, her mouth hanging slightly open. She looks down at her clipboard and then back at Brenda. Brenda's fake tears instantly dry up. Her theatrical sobbing stops dead in her throat. The color drains completely out of her face as she realizes her Oscar-worthy performance was just dismantled by cold, hard digital evidence. She takes a nervous step backwards, suddenly looking very small in her expensive vacation clothes. The criminal kidnapping narrative is completely dead. My parents cannot put me in jail. But Jerome refuses to admit defeat. He realizes the police are no longer his personal attack dogs, so he shifts instantly to his favorite weapon of mass destruction: civil litigation. He reaches into his tailored linen jacket, his hands shaking with barely contained fury. He pulls out a thick stack of freshly printed legal documents. He steps forward and forcefully slaps the heavy paperwork directly against the center of my chest. "You think you are so clever!" Jerome snarls, his face turning a dark, mottled red as the veins in his neck bulge. "You are officially served, Maya. $2 million for tortious interference. You deliberately and maliciously sabotaged Trevor's real estate deal tonight and caused massive, irreparable financial damages to his firm. I am going to bury you in civil court. I am going to bankrupt you. I am going to take your apartment, your bank accounts, and every single penny you ever earn for the rest of your miserable life." The thick stack of legal papers falls from my chest and hits the floor between my feet. The pages scatter across the hallway. I do not even bother looking down at them. Elias steps forward, planting his leather dress shoe directly onto the pristine white pages of Jerome's $2 million lawsuit. Elias lets out a dark, reverberating laugh that echoes off the walls of my apartment building. It is not a polite chuckle. It is the deep, predatory laugh of a man who has just been handed a loaded gun by his enemy. "You want to sue for tortious interference, Jerome?" Elias asks, his voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. That is a fascinating legal strategy. You see, to claim interference, you must first possess a legally valid contract. Your son-in-law attempted to sell a federally protected historical heritage site to a foreign entity using a forged power of attorney. That is not a real estate deal. That is a multi-million-dollar federal fraud conspiracy. And as of 5 o'clock this morning, a federal district judge granted our emergency injunction. The sale is completely void, the bulldozers are impounded, and your $2 million civil suit is nothing but a printed confession of your own direct involvement. The remaining color completely drains from Jerome's face. He looks at Elias, then at the scattered papers on the floor, And finally at the police officer who has now crossed his arms, thoroughly disgusted by my parents. Brenda reaches out and grips Jerome's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his expensive linen shirt. They realize in real time that their intimidation tactics hold absolutely no power here. "Get out of my hallway," I tell them, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "The next time I see you, it will be in a federal courtroom." They turn and walk toward the elevator in absolute silence. The police officer and the adult protective services worker follow them, making sure they leave the premises entirely. Elias and I do not waste a single second celebrating. We turn around, step over my broken doorframe, and immediately get to work. We are not just going to defend against their attacks, we are going to obliterate their entire financial existence. The next 24 hours are an absolute legal blitzkrieg. Elias does not just dismiss Jerome's civil lawsuit. He counterstrikes with a magnitude of legal force my family has never experienced. We file a massive countersuit for fraud, elder abuse, and financial exploitation. Before my parents even have time to unpack their vacation luggage, Elias dispatches a team of aggressive process servers across the city. We drop subpoenas on everyone. Jerome is served while pulling into his country club. Brenda is handed her papers while sitting at her weekly charity luncheon. Jasmine and Trevor are served simultaneously at their sprawling suburban mansion. We demand every bank statement, every tax return, every email, and every text message related to Grandma Ruby and Pinnacle Developments. Elias does not stop with subpoenas. He takes the overwhelming mountain of forensic evidence I compiled, the offshore routing numbers, the casino markers, the fake LLCs, and marches straight back into the federal courthouse. He presents the judge with indisputable proof that Trevor and Jasmine are actively using stolen funds to finance their lifestyle, and that Jerome and Brenda received massive kickbacks from the illegal land sale. The judge does not hesitate. He signs a comprehensive immediate asset freeze. By noon on Wednesday, the financial guillotine drops. Every single bank account tied to Trevor and Jasmine is frozen entirely. Their joint checking, their savings, Trevor's corporate accounts, all of it is instantly locked by federal order. But we go further. Because my parents received wired funds directly traced back to Ruby's drained accounts, the judge freezes Jerome and Brenda's retirement portfolios and investment accounts. The money they stole to maintain their fake glamorous image is now completely inaccessible. They are locked out of their own lives. I am sitting at my desk in my high-security forensic accounting firm on Thursday afternoon, reviewing the latest court filings when the phone on my desk rings. It is the security desk down in the lobby. The guard sounds incredibly tense. He tells me there is a woman downstairs screaming my name and threatening to throw a marble planter through the glass security doors if I do not come down immediately. I know exactly who it is. I stand up, smooth out my tailored blazer, and take the elevator down to the lobby. The moment the metal doors slide open, the shrill, frantic sound of my sister's voice hits my ears. Jasmine is pacing furiously across the polished marble floor of my building. She is clutching her designer handbag like a weapon. Her hair is disheveled, and she looks completely unhinged. When she sees me walking out of the elevator, she lunges forward, stopping just short of the heavy security turnstiles. "You fix this right now, Maya," she screams, pointing a shaking, perfectly manicured finger at my face. "You call whatever cheap lawyer you hired and you unfreeze my accounts this exact second." I cross my arms and look at her calmly. "Hello, Jasmine. I see you got my legal notices." She lets out a sound of pure, unfiltered rage. "I was just at the luxury boutique in Buckhead," she yells, her voice echoing off the high ceilings and drawing the attention of everyone in the lobby. "I was trying to buy a dress for the country club gala this weekend." My black card declined. I handed them 3 different credit cards, and every single one of them was declined in front of the entire store. The manager looked at me like I was a common criminal. "You did this. You are nothing but a jealous hater. You have always been jealous of my marriage and my money. You are just a broke spinster trying to ruin my life because you could never get a man like Trevor." I look at her, truly looking at the sister I grew up with. She is 30 years old, throwing a massive temper tantrum in a corporate lobby because she cannot buy a designer dress. She has absolutely no comprehension of the reality she is facing. She thinks this is just another petty sibling rivalry. She thinks she can bully me into submission by flaunting her superficial status, just like our parents always encouraged her to do when we were kids. She expects me to back down just to keep the peace. I walk over to the security desk, pick up a thick bound document I left there earlier, and walk back to the turnstile. I slide the document across the polished counter toward her. I am not a jealous hater, Jasmine, I say, keeping my voice incredibly even. I am the forensic accountant who just mapped out exactly how you and your husband stole $400,000 from a woman with Alzheimer's disease. I point to the document. That is a courtesy copy of the draft federal indictment currently sitting on the desk of the United States Attorney. Jasmine looks down at the thick stack of paper, her anger faltering slightly as the heavy legal terminology catches her eye. Your husband did not just steal from Ruby. I continue stepping closer to the glass barrier. He attempted to sell a federally protected heritage site. That is a massive federal crime. And since you happily accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars of that stolen cash into your personal accounts to fund your lavish lifestyle, the federal government views you as an active co-conspirator. You are not just facing bankruptcy, Jasmine. You are facing charges for money laundering, wire fraud, and elder exploitation. Her mouth opens, but no sound comes out. The reality of the situation is finally piercing through her thick bubble of entitlement. The federal judge froze your assets because you purchased your entire life with stolen money. I tell her, my voice dropping to a harsh, unforgiving tone. The cars, the jewelry, the country club memberships. None of it actually belongs to you. The feds are going to seize all of it to pay back what you owe. So I suggest you stop screaming about designer dresses and start looking for a public defender. Because as of right now, you cannot afford to hire a private attorney. You are entirely broke. I turn my back on her and walk away. I do not look over my shoulder as she stands completely frozen in the lobby, staring down at the federal indictment that outlines the absolute destruction of her fake empire. I step back into the elevator, the quiet hum of the machinery feeling incredibly peaceful after the chaos of her shouting. I ride the elevator back up to my secure floor, feeling a deep, resonating sense of justice. My family wanted to cast me out because I refused to play by their toxic rules. They thought my integrity made me weak. They are finally learning that my integrity is the exact weapon that will dismantle their entire existence. I walk back into my private office and sit down at my multi-monitor workstation. I need to finalize the asset tracing reports for Elias before our strategy meeting tomorrow morning. I reach for my mouse to wake up my screens. Instantly, a bright flashing red banner covers all three of my computer monitors. A loud rhythmic warning siren blares from my desktop speakers. The entire room is bathed in the harsh red light of the emergency security protocol. My hands fly over the keyboard, running a rapid diagnostic check on my firm's heavily encrypted servers. The data streams across my screen at lightning speed. Someone is actively executing a massive, sophisticated cyber attack against my personal server network. They are deploying a brutal, brute force algorithm attempting to smash through my firewalls and gain unauthorized access to the specific digital vault where I am storing the financial evidence against Pinnacle Developments. My blood runs cold. Trevor knows that the physical bulldozers have been stopped. He knows the bank accounts are completely frozen. He realizes that the only way to save himself from a federal prison sentence is to permanently destroy the digital proof of his crimes before the court date. He is actively trying to wipe the financial trails, and he has hired a professional team of hackers to burn my servers to the ground. The blaring siren from my desktop speakers fills the sterile silence of my office, a sharp mechanical scream that demands immediate action. The three massive monitors in front of me flash a blinding, synchronized crimson red. Someone is hammering against the outer perimeter of my firm's digital security, and they are doing it with brute, uncoordinated force. I do not panic. My heart rate remains entirely steady. When I established this forensic accounting firm, I did not just buy off-the-shelf security software. I built our internal application architecture from the ground up. I utilized my extensive background in development coding the entire back-end defense matrix in Kotlin, layering it beneath complex XML configurations to create a digital labyrinth that is virtually impossible to navigate without the master key. Trevor has clearly hired a team of black market cyber mercenaries, but he made the fatal mistake of going cheap. They are using automated botnets to batter my firewalls with thousands of randomized password injections per second. It is loud, it is sloppy, and it is entirely predictable. My fingers fly across my mechanical keyboard, the heavy clack of the keys echoing in the red-lit room. I do not just want to block them. Blocking them tells Trevor that his attack failed, which will only prompt him to hire a more sophisticated crew or attempt another physical breach at my apartment. I need them to believe they have won. I need them to report back to Trevor that the digital evidence of his massive federal fraud is gone forever. I initiate a secondary protocol I designed specifically for this exact scenario. I rapidly spin up a honeypot server. It is a completely isolated phantom drive that looks identical to my main forensic vault. I populate it instantly with thousands of dummy files, complex-looking spreadsheets, heavily encrypted zip folders, and massive data ledgers that consist of absolutely nothing but randomized, meaningless numbers. I meticulously label the master folder with the name Pinnacle Developments Escrow Records. It is the perfect irresistible bait. Once the honeypot is fully armed, I intentionally lower the defense threshold on my outer firewall just a fraction of an inch. I crack the digital door open. The hackers bite immediately. The automated attack software surges through the deliberate vulnerability, bypassing my outer walls and flooding directly into the phantom server. I watch my command terminal light up with a rapid stream of green text as the mercenaries latch onto the dummy files. They begin downloading the fake financial ledgers at a frantic pace. The moment the massive data transfer is complete, I watch as their malicious code executes a remote wipe command. They burn the phantom server to the ground, deleting every single meaningless file I just fed them. The red flashing lights on my monitor suddenly cease. The siren cuts off, plunging my office back into near total silence. The standard blue glow of my desktop returns. They are gone. They have disconnected, entirely convinced they just eradicated the only existing proof of Trevor's $5 million federal crime. I lean back in my ergonomic chair and let out a slow, satisfied breath. I reach under my heavy mahogany desk, unlock a biometric steel safe, and pull out a sleek titanium external hard drive. This is the cold storage unit. It is completely disconnected from the internet and physically isolated from any wireless network. I plug it into a secure air-gapped terminal on my desk and transfer the genuine, uncorrupted banking ledgers, the forged power of attorney, and the Federal Heritage Trust documents directly onto the drive. I disconnect the drive, place it back into the biometric safe, and lock it tight. The evidence is untouchable. Checkmate. Just as I turn back to my primary workstation, my personal cell phone begins to vibrate against the glass surface of my desk. The caller ID displays my mother's name, Brenda. I let it ring 3 times, staring at the screen. Barely 24 hours ago, she was standing in the hallway of my apartment building, delivering an Oscar-worthy performance to a group of armed police officers trying to have me arrested for kidnapping. She tried to throw me in a jail cell to protect her stolen wealth. Now, with her bank accounts completely frozen by a federal judge and subpoenas raining down on her perfect suburban life, the dynamic has fundamentally shifted. I tap the screen and accept the call, putting her on speakerphone. I do not say hello. I simply let the silence stretch out, forcing her to speak first. Maya, Brenda says. Her voice is entirely unrecognizable. The arrogant, condescending tone she used my entire life is completely gone. The aggressive, theatrical confidence she displayed in front of the police has vanished. She sounds small, fragile, and utterly broken. Maya, please, she weeps, her breath catching in her throat. You have to listen to me. You have to make this stop. I cannot take this anymore. I remain perfectly silent, leaning forward and resting my chin on my steepled fingers. It is a nightmare, Maya, she cries, the desperation pouring out of the speaker. Do you know what happened today? I went to the country club for my weekly charity committee meeting. The moment I walked into the dining room, the entire table went dead silent. Everyone was staring at me. Margaret Jenkins actually turned her chair around so she would not have to look at me. The club president pulled me aside and told me my membership is suspended pending the federal investigation. They treated me like a leper. The gossip is everywhere. My friends will not even return my text messages. You are destroying the family name. You are ruining us. The sheer audacity of her narcissism is almost breathtaking. She is not weeping out of remorse for stealing from a woman with severe dementia. She is not crying because she betrayed her own daughter. She is sobbing because her wealthy socialite friends at the country club are freezing her out of their elitist circle. Her entire world revolves around appearances, and I have just shattered the pristine glass house she spent decades building. Please, Maya. Brenda begs, her voice dropping to a frantic conspiratorial whisper. You do not understand the stress your father is under. His retirement accounts are completely locked. Trevor is facing federal prison. Jasmine has not stopped screaming for 2 days. We can fix this. We are family. We can handle this privately. If you drop the federal lawsuit and withdraw the injunction on the land, we will make it worth your while. We have the $5 million contract from the development group. We will give you a cut. We will give you a full 20% of the sale straight cash deposited into whatever account you want. You will be a millionaire overnight. Just drop the case and let the bulldozers do their job. A cold, heavy disgust settles deep into my bones. They are backed into a corner facing absolute financial ruin and federal prison sentences, and their only instinct is to try and bribe the prosecution. They truly believe that everyone in the world is as morally bankrupt and greedy as they are. They believe that my silence has a price tag. I reach out and pick up the phone, taking it off speaker. I hold the device close to my mouth, my voice dropping to a pitch of absolute freezing calm. Listen to me very carefully, Brenda, I say, refusing to call her mother. The farm is not for sale. Not for $5 million. Not for $50 million. You do not have the authority to sell it, and you never did. You built your entire legacy on stolen land and elder abuse. You spent your whole life pretending to be better than everyone else, looking down your nose at people who actually work for a living while you funded your designer lifestyle by bleeding a sick, vulnerable woman dry. She tries to interrupt, a pathetic sob escaping her lips, but I cut her off immediately. There is no deal, I state with absolute finality. There is no private settlement. You made your choices when you forged that power of attorney and abandoned Ruby at an airport terminal. The federal government is going to strip you down to the studs. You are going to lose the country club, you are going to lose the cars, and you are going to lose the house. Enjoy your new reputation, Brenda. It is exactly what you earned. I press the red button on the screen and end the call. I block her number entirely. I set the phone down on my desk, feeling a profound sense of closure. The lifelong chain of seeking their approval, of hoping they would eventually treat me with basic human respect, is permanently severed. I am entirely free. Less than 60 seconds later, my phone rings again. The caller ID displays the name of my attorney. I answer it immediately. Elias, I say. Trevor just tried to hack my servers. I sandboxed his mercenaries and secured the real data offline. They think they wiped our evidence. Elias lets out a dark, reverberating laugh. Let them think they won, he replies, his voice tight with professional anticipation. When we present the physical drive in court, the look on Trevor's face will be worth the price of admission. But we have a more pressing issue right now, Maya. The federal clerk just processed our emergency docket. We have been assigned a trial date and a presiding official. I sit up straight, grabbing a pen and pulling a legal pad toward me. Who did we get? Judge Gwendolyn Carter. Elias says, the name carrying a heavy, undeniable weight. I stop writing. Even outside of legal circles, Judge Carter has a reputation in Atlanta. She is a notoriously strict, entirely unpredictable federal magistrate. She is legendary for tearing both prosecution and defense attorneys to shreds if they step out of line in her courtroom. She has a deep, extensive history of presiding over complex corporate fraud and embezzlement cases. Elias continues, his tone shifting into absolute seriousness. She despises white-collar criminals, but she is also incredibly demanding of the burden of proof. We cannot go into her courtroom relying solely on emotional appeals or family drama. She will throw the case out if we waste her time. We have to be flawless, Maya. The financial tracing has to be airtight. Every single dollar has to be accounted for, and every document has to be verified. I look at the biometric safe sitting under my desk. The evidence is perfect, I assure him. The tracing is flawless. I have them dead to rights. When is the hearing? Elias takes a deep breath, the reality of the federal timeline setting in. The federal circuit moves fast when national heritage sites and multi-million-dollar wire fraud are involved, he says. The emergency trial is scheduled for this Friday. We have exactly 3 days to prepare the final exhibits. Friday morning, we step into the courtroom and we end this. Friday morning arrives with a heavy, suffocating downpour, the Atlanta rain lashing against the massive concrete pillars of the federal courthouse. I walk through the imposing glass doors beside Elias, my heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floors. We have barely slept. We spent the last 72 hours fortifying my digital servers against Trevor's relentless mercenary hackers and physically printing out every single piece of financial evidence in triplicate. We bypass the local municipal courts entirely and take the private elevator up to the federal circuit level. The air up here is different. It is cold, sterile, and completely unforgiving. We push open the heavy oak doors of courtroom 4B. The gallery is empty, but the defense table is completely packed. Trevor and Jerome have spared absolutely no expense. They have hired a premier white-collar defense firm. 4 attorneys in immaculate custom-tailored suits are clustered around the table whispering strategies and organizing perfectly bound legal briefs. They are being paid by the hour, and every single cent of their exorbitant retainer is being funded by the money they stole from my grandmother. Jerome and Brenda are seated in the front row right behind the wooden barricade. They look like they are attending a high society brunch rather than a federal fraud hearing. Brenda is wearing a conservative but clearly designer beige dress, her hands folded neatly in her lap, projecting the image of a deeply concerned, upstanding matriarch. Jerome has his chin held high, projecting absolute arrogance. He looks at me as I walk down the aisle and lets out a quiet, dismissive scoff. At the defense table, Trevor is completely ignoring the gravity of the situation. He is leaning back in his chair, aggressively tapping away on his smartphone. He is likely texting his offshore investors and the international conglomerate, assuring them that this federal injunction is nothing but a minor nuisance, a tiny clerical error that his expensive lawyers will squash before lunchtime. He thinks his money makes him bulletproof. Jasmine sits next to him, glaring daggers at me. She is playing the role of the victimized wife flawlessly, occasionally dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. Elias and I take our seats at the plaintiff's table. I place my heavy leather bag on the floor and set my encrypted offline drive gently onto the wooden table. Elias does not look at the opposing counsel. He simply opens his legal pad and uncaps his pen, radiating a quiet, lethal confidence. The heavy side door opens, and the bailiff announces the arrival of Judge Gwendolyn Carter. The entire room stands at attention. Judge Carter takes her seat at the bench. She is a striking, formidable presence. Her face is a mask of absolute authority, lined with years of presiding over complex corporate embezzlement and high-stakes federal fraud cases. She is famous for her zero-tolerance policy regarding courtroom theatrics. She adjusts her glasses, looks down at the massive case file in front of her, and then looks directly at the defense table. She instructs them to begin their motion to dissolve the emergency injunction. The lead defense counsel stands up. He is a tall, silver-haired man with a smooth, practiced voice that commands the room. He does not start by defending the real estate transaction. He does not mention the $5 million wire transfer or the offshore shell companies. He goes straight for my throat. Your Honor. The defense attorney begins pacing slowly in front of the bench. What we have here today is not a case of federal wire fraud. It is not an illegal land grab. What we are witnessing is a tragic, desperate cry for attention from a deeply troubled young woman. He turns and points a perfectly manicured finger directly at me. Maya Wilson is a rogue accountant. She is an estranged, bitter daughter who has spent the last 5 years completely isolated from her loving family. I do not flinch. I keep my eyes locked on the lawyer, my face entirely blank. He turns back to the judge, lowering his voice to a tone of sympathetic sorrow. Miss Wilson is severely envious of her sister Jasmine, who sits before you today as a devoted wife to a highly successful commercial developer. Maya Wilson could not stand to see her family thriving. She could not handle her own professional inadequacies, so she decided to weaponize this honorable court. She fabricated these wild accusations of fraud and embezzlement simply because she is a jealous hater. Furthermore, Your Honor, she is financially desperate. 2 days ago, she actively removed her elderly grandmother from an airport terminal in a baseless attempt to extort my clients for money. Brenda lets out a perfectly timed muffled sob from the gallery. Judge Carter glances at Brenda, her expression completely unreadable, before returning her gaze to the defense attorney. The lawyer walks back to his table and picks up a single sheet of paper inside a clear plastic sleeve. He holds it up high for the judge to see. This injunction is built on a mountain of petty family grievances, he declares, his voice echoing in the large room. The plaintiff claims that Trevor and Jerome Wilson stole the family farm, but we hold in our hands the absolute, undeniable truth. This is a legally binding, fully executed power of attorney. It is signed by Ruby Wilson. It is stamped by a licensed state notary, and it is witnessed by 2 upstanding members of the local community. He approaches the bench and hands the document to the bailiff, who passes it up to Judge Carter. Ruby Wilson was completely lucid when she signed that document. The lawyer lies smoothly, not missing a single beat. She understood that her dementia care would be incredibly expensive. She knew she required round-the-clock premium medical attention. Jerome Wilson made the heartbreaking, difficult decision as a loving son to liquidate an unused, dilapidated piece of rural property to ensure his mother received the care she deserves. Trevor stepped in to facilitate the sale using his professional network. They did not steal anything, Your Honor. They were securing Ruby Wilson's future. The audacity of the lie is breathtaking. They are using the exact theft they committed to paint themselves as heroes. They are trying to convince a federal judge that selling our ancestral home to a foreign conglomerate was an act of familial devotion. Trevor finally puts his phone away. He crosses his arms over his chest and shoots me a slow, arrogant wink. He thinks he has already won. He thinks the forged piece of paper is a magical shield that will protect his $5 million payday. The defense attorney returns to his seat looking incredibly smug. We respectfully request that this court immediately dissolve the emergency injunction, release the frozen escrow funds back to Pinnacle Developments, and dismiss this case with prejudice. The courtroom falls into a heavy, suffocating silence. Judge Carter looks down at the power of attorney document resting on her bench. She reads it carefully, her eyes scanning the notary stamp and the signatures. The air in the room feels thick enough to cut with a knife. I can hear the faint, rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. Finally, Judge Carter lowers the document. She slides her glasses down the bridge of her nose and looks directly across the room at the plaintiff's table. Her dark eyes lock onto me and Elias. The weight of her judicial authority presses down on us like a physical force. Counselor, Judge Carter says, addressing Elias. Her voice is low, cold, and incredibly sharp. Your client has brought this entire federal court to a grinding halt. You have levied massive career-destroying allegations against these defendants. You have accused them of multi-million-dollar wire fraud and the illegal sale of federally protected lands. Yet the defense has just presented this court with a legally notarized, officially witnessed instrument authorizing the exact sale you are trying to block. Elias sits perfectly still next to me. He does not say a word. He waits for the judge to finish her thought. Let me be abundantly clear. Judge Carter continues, her voice rising in volume, echoing off the mahogany walls. I do not allow my courtroom to be utilized as a theater for family dysfunction. I do not entertain petty sibling rivalries, and I absolutely do not tolerate frivolous filings designed to harass legitimate business owners. She leans forward over the bench, her gaze burning into mine. You have exactly one chance to prove your claims, she warns, the threat hanging heavy in the sterile air. Do you have actual, irrefutable, verifiable proof to contradict this legally notarized document? Because if you do not, I will dissolve your injunction right now, I will release their funds, I will dismiss your claims, and I will have the federal marshals take your client into custody for contempt of court for wasting my time. Do we understand each other? I do not look at Elias. I do not look at my parents. I keep my eyes locked entirely on Judge Gwendolyn Carter. I slowly reach my hand toward the encrypted offline drive sitting on the table in front of me. Every single person in the room is watching me. The silence is absolute. I am ready to drop the bomb. I look directly into Judge Gwendolyn Carter's unblinking eyes. I do not hesitate. I do not show a single ounce of intimidation. I reach down, pick up the titanium encrypted offline drive from the plaintiff table, and set it down with a sharp, definitive click. We have the absolute proof, Your Honor. I state, my voice carrying clearly across the vast, silent expanse of the federal courtroom. Judge Carter's expression does not soften, but she gives a slow, barely perceptible nod. She turns her gaze to my attorney. Proceed, counselor, she commands. Elias stands up, buttoning his suit jacket with fluid grace. The defense has made extraordinary claims regarding the character and motivations of my client Elias, says his voice projecting effortless authority. They have attempted to paint a narrative of emotional hysteria. But we are not here to debate family feelings. We are here to debate mathematics, federal law, and documented financial exploitation. The plaintiff calls Maya Wilson to the stand. I rise from my chair and walk across the polished mahogany floor. Every eye in the defense gallery tracks my movement. I can feel the pure, concentrated hatred rolling off my sister Jasmine, and the seething arrogance radiating from Trevor. My father Jerome sits rigidly in the front row, his arms crossed over his chest, trying to maintain his aura of untouchable power. I ignore all of them. I step into the witness box, place my right hand on the Bible, and swear to tell the whole truth. As I take my seat, my pulse is steady. This is my domain. In this box, their lies mean absolutely nothing. Elias approaches the podium. He spends the first 5 minutes meticulously establishing my credentials. He walks the court through my master's degree in forensic accounting, my certifications as a fraud examiner, and my extensive history of uncovering corporate embezzlement for high-tier legal clients. Judge Carter takes careful notes, actively recognizing that I am not just a disgruntled daughter. I am a highly trained, lethal financial weapon. Miss Wilson. Elias begins gesturing toward the defense table. The opposing counsel claims that the $400,000 liquidated from Ruby Wilson's accounts was utilized entirely to secure her medical future. Did your forensic audit verify this claim? No, it did not. I reply, my voice ringing with cold, absolute certainty. The funds were systematically embezzled to cover illegal gambling debts and finance luxury personal expenses. The lead defense attorney jumps to his feet, his face red with sudden panic. Objection. Your Honor, that is a baseless, inflammatory accusation. Judge Carter slams her gavel down instantly, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Overruled, she snaps, glaring at the defense lawyer. This witness is a certified forensic accountant, testifying on her own audit. You will sit down and let her present her findings, or I will fine you for interrupting my courtroom. The defense lawyer slowly sinks back into his leather chair, the color draining from his face. Elias signals to the court bailiff, who rolls 3 massive high-gloss foam boards into the center of the courtroom, positioning them directly facing the judge's bench. These are not messy, confusing spreadsheets. They are perfectly mapped, color-coded financial flowcharts that I designed to be undeniable. Elias asks me to walk the court through the money trail. I stand up from the witness chair, picking up a laser pointer. I direct the red beam to the top of the first foam board. On February 12th, exactly $400,000 was wired out of Ruby Wilson's high-yield savings account, I explain, keeping my tone entirely clinical. The defense claims this money was secured for medical care. However, the funds did not go to a medical trust, a healthcare facility, or an insurance escrow. The routing numbers prove the money was sent to a Delaware-based LLC. I click the laser pointer to the second block on the board. I pulled the corporate registry filings for this specific LLC. The state franchise tax fee for this dummy corporation was paid using a Visa business credit card belonging to Pinnacle Developments. That is the commercial real estate firm owned and operated by Trevor. He funneled a sick woman's life savings directly into his own corporate holding accounts. A heavy, suffocating silence falls over the courtroom. I can hear Trevor shifting uncomfortably in his seat. But Trevor did not use this money for real estate. I continue moving to the second foam board. I ran a secondary trace on the outgoing wires from Pinnacle Developments. I highlight a series of massive sequential payments. $80,000 routed to an offshore clearinghouse in the Cayman Islands. $50,000 wired to a sports betting syndicate in Costa Rica. Trevor is a degenerate gambler who used his grandmother-in-law's retirement fund to cover massive offshore casino markers so his bookies would not ruin him. The defense table erupts in frantic, hushed whispers. Jasmine turns in her chair, staring at Trevor with wide, furious eyes. She knew about the money, but clearly Trevor had lied to her about the gambling debts. I do not stop. I move the laser pointer to the third foam board, aiming directly at Jasmine's financial timeline. The remaining funds were routed back into local accounts, I state, my voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. I traced a steady stream of $15,000 transfers moving from the dummy LLC into a joint checking account held by Trevor and Jasmine. Let us look at how those specific funds were spent. $30,000 wired to a luxury dealership in Buckhead to pay off the lease on a luxury SUV. $15,000 used to clear a maxed-out American Express card, consisting entirely of purchases from designer boutiques in Paris. Another $20,000 wired directly to an exclusive Atlanta country club to prepay their membership dues. I turn off the laser pointer and look directly at Judge Carter. There is absolutely zero evidence of a single penny being spent on Ruby Wilson's medical care. This was a highly coordinated, systematic looting of a vulnerable elder's estate to fund a lavish, fraudulent lifestyle. Judge Carter's face is a mask of pure, lethal fury. She scribbles furiously on her legal pad, her pen carving deep indentations into the paper. She looks at the defense table with absolute disgust. Elias steps out from behind the podium, holding a clear plastic sleeve containing the defense's prized piece of evidence. He approaches the witness stand and hands it to me. Miss Wilson, Elias says, his voice dropping an octave. The defense has submitted this power of attorney document. They claim it legally authorized Jerome and Trevor to liquidate Ruby's assets. They claim it was signed willingly and properly notarized. As a fraud investigator, have you reviewed this document? I hold the paper up. I have. And what is your professional conclusion? Elias asks. I look directly at Jerome, who is sweating profusely in the front row. It is a complete, undeniable forgery, I declare. The lead defense attorney rockets out of his chair. Objection. Your Honor, this is outrageous. This document bears a verified state notary stamp. The plaintiff is committing perjury. Judge Carter leans over her bench, her eyes locked on me. I will allow the witness to explain her findings, Judge Carter says, her voice dangerously quiet. But you had better be absolutely certain about what you are saying, Miss Wilson. I am entirely certain, Your Honor. I reply, placing the document flat on the ledge of the witness box. I pull a certified medical folder from my bag. First, we have Ruby Wilson's official medical records from a board-certified neurologist. These records are dated precisely 14 months ago, declaring her legally incapacitated due to advanced rapid-onset Alzheimer's disease. She was legally stripped of her ability to sign binding contracts on that exact date. I pick up the power of attorney document again. Knowing this, my father Jerome and his son-in-law Trevor attempted to backdate this power of attorney. They convinced a corrupt local notary to stamp this document with a date 18 months ago, making it appear as though Ruby signed it 4 months before her official diagnosis. It was a clever strategy to bypass her medical incapacitation. I pause, letting the tension in the room build to a breaking point. However, I continue pulling a final stack of papers from my bag. Perpetrators of financial fraud often overlook basic administrative logistics. I hold up the official state registry records for commissioned notaries. Every single notary stamp has a unique commission number and an expiration date printed on the circular seal. I point to the blown-up image of the stamp on my final foam board. I ran the commission number printed on this exact stamp through the state registry. This specific physical stamp bearing this exact commission number was not manufactured or issued by the state until 3 months after Ruby Wilson was declared legally incapacitated. The courtroom goes dead silent. It is physically impossible for this stamp to have been used on the date written on this document, I state, delivering the final fatal blow. The stamp did not exist. Jerome and Trevor backdated the paperwork, but they used a newly issued notary stamp to do it. The document is a retroactive forgery. It is entirely void, and the notary who stamped it has already been reported to the State Ethics Board. The high-priced corporate defense lawyers look like they are going to be sick. The lead counsel drops his pen, his hands shaking as he stares at his own copies of the forged document, realizing his clients just used him to submit fabricated evidence to a federal judge. Brenda covers her face with her hands, letting out a genuine, terrified sob. Jerome looks like he cannot breathe, his hands gripping the wooden bench in front of him so tightly his knuckles are completely white. Judge Carter turns her gaze to the defense table. The silence in the room is suffocating. She slowly reaches for her gavel, preparing to hold the entire defense in contempt and refer the matter to the federal prosecutor for immediate criminal indictment. But before she can strike the wood, Trevor snaps. His arrogant, entitled ego completely overrides his high-priced legal counsel. He shoves his heavy wooden chair backward with such violent force that it crashes into the floor. He stands up, his face twisted in a mask of pure, desperate rage. He points a shaking finger directly at me, completely ignoring the federal judge sitting just feet away. "You think you are so smart?" Trevor screams, his voice echoing frantically across the courtroom. "You think this stupid piece of paper matters? It does not mean anything. I do not care if the power of attorney is void." "Trevor, sit down and shut your mouth." His lead attorney hisses, desperately trying to grab the sleeve of Trevor's custom suit. Trevor violently yanks his arm away. "No," he shouts, turning to look directly at the judge. "The land is already gone. You are too late, Maya. I did not need the power of attorney to finalize the dirt. I used a municipal loophole in the county registrar's office. The local magistrate pushed the deed transfer through the system on an emergency commercial override. I possess the final registered deed in my company's name. The sale to the international investors is entirely bulletproof. The $5 million is mine, and there is absolutely nothing a federal judge can do to reverse a finalized county land transaction." Trevor stands there, his chest heaving, his expensive tailored suit suddenly looking too tight across his shoulders. His voice echoes off the high ceilings of the federal courtroom, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. He has just shouted at a federal magistrate. He has just proudly confessed to executing a backdoor municipal real estate deal to bypass a federal injunction. He thinks he has delivered a lethal checkmate. He expects me to shrink back in defeat. He expects Elias to pack up his briefcase. I do not move a single muscle. I keep my eyes fixed entirely on Judge Gwendolyn Carter. Judge Carter does not yell. She does not reach for her gavel immediately. She simply stares at Trevor with a look of such absolute sub-zero disgust that the temperature in the room seems to plummet. The lead defense attorney sitting next to Trevor has physically recoiled, burying his face in his hands. He knows exactly what his client has just done. "Are you quite finished, Mr. Wilson?" Judge Carter asks. Her voice is barely a whisper, yet it carries a lethal razor-sharp edge that cuts through the tension like a scalpel. Trevor scoffs, adjusting his silk tie, though a microscopic tremor has appeared in his hands. "I am just stating the facts, Your Honor. The deed is transferred. The money is in transit. The deal is done." Judge Carter shifts her dark, unblinking gaze from Trevor to Elias. "Counselor," she says, "do you have a response to this municipal loophole your opposing party is so proud of?" Elias steps away from the podium. He does not even look at Trevor. He turns entirely to me and offers a slight deferential nod. "The plaintiff has one final exhibit to submit, Your Honor," Elias states smoothly. "I will allow Miss Wilson to explain the mechanics of the transaction in question." I stand up from the witness chair. I do not need my laser pointer anymore. I reach down into my heavy leather bag and pull out a single thick folder made of heavy cream parchment. It is bound with a dark blue ribbon and bears the embossed, unmistakable gold seal of the United States Department of the Interior. I walk over to the bailiff and hand him the folder. He carries it up the steps and places it directly on Judge Carter's bench. What Trevor Wilson just described to this court is a fascinating attempt at municipal real estate fraud. I begin turning to face the defense table. My voice is entirely devoid of emotion. I am not speaking as a sister or a daughter. I am speaking as the executioner of their empire. He claims that he utilized a local county registrar to force a deed transfer. He claims that because he holds a municipal piece of paper, his sale to the international development conglomerate is legally binding. I step closer to the wooden barrier separating the witness stand from the floor. However, I continue watching Trevor's smug expression begin to falter. The municipal deed Trevor Wilson holds is worth absolutely nothing. It is a phantom asset. 5 years ago, when my grandmother Ruby first received her preliminary diagnosis, she knew her mind would eventually fail her. She knew her son Jerome was obsessed with liquidating her property to fund his lifestyle, so she took permanent, irrevocable action to protect our family's ancestral home. I point to the heavy cream folder resting in front of the judge. That document is the finalized approved charter from the Federal Black Heritage Trust. I state my words dropping like anvils onto the defense table. Ruby Wilson formally surrendered the commercial rights of the farm to the federal government. The property is a permanently designated, federally protected historical landmark. It does not belong to me. It does not belong to Jerome. And it certainly does not belong to Trevor's dummy corporation. It belongs to the federal trust. The color instantly drains from Jerome's face. He slumps back in his chair as if he has been physically struck. Brenda lets out a sharp, genuine gasp, her manicured hand flying to her throat. A municipal county clerk cannot override a federal historical trust lock, I explain, locking eyes with Trevor. The moment that land was federally designated, it became completely immune to private commercial sale. It cannot be bought, it cannot be leveraged, and it cannot be bulldozed. Trevor Wilson did not sell a piece of prime real estate to his offshore investors. He sold them absolutely nothing. He fabricated a commercial sale out of thin air. The silence in the courtroom is absolute, heavy, and suffocating. I can physically see the gears grinding to a halt inside Trevor's head as the reality of his situation crashes down on him. He just took $5 million from a ruthless international development conglomerate. He wired hundreds of thousands of dollars of that money to offshore sports betting syndicates to cover his gambling markers. He spent tens of thousands on luxury cars and country club dues. The money is already gone, and now he cannot deliver the land. He has stolen $5 million from some of the most dangerous, unforgiving corporate investors on the planet. No, Trevor whispers, his voice cracking. No, the local magistrate pushed it through. The title was clear. I ran the title search myself. You ran a municipal title search in a corrupted local office that Jerome paid off. I correct him, my voice completely merciless. You did not run a federal registry check because you were too arrogant and too desperate for cash to do your due diligence. Trevor's face goes from stark white to a mottled, furious red. The sheer panic overrides his every instinct for self-preservation. He realizes that he is not just facing bankruptcy. He is facing the wrath of the people he just defrauded. He leaps up from his chair, knocking it completely over. He spins around, lunging toward the gallery barrier where Jerome and Brenda are sitting. You said it was clear, Trevor screams at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing violently off the mahogany walls. He points a trembling, accusatory finger directly at my father. You told me the title was clear, Jerome. You said the old woman never filed any federal paperwork. I already took the $5 million. I already spent the advance. I took $5 million from my investors. Jasmine reaches up desperately, trying to grab the sleeve of his suit jacket. Trevor, stop! She hisses, her face pale with terror. You are in a courtroom. Trevor violently rips his arm out of her grasp. Shut up, Jasmine, he roars, completely unhinged. Your father lied to me. I took $5 million for a piece of land that does not exist. They are going to kill me. The investors are going to destroy me. Judge Carter brings her heavy wooden gavel down against the sounding block with the force of a thunderclap. The sharp, explosive crack silences the entire room instantly. Trevor freezes, panting heavily, his eyes darting wildly around the room as he suddenly realizes exactly what he just did. He just screamed a full, uncoerced confession to massive corporate wire fraud on the public record in front of a federal judge surrounded by federal marshals. Bailiffs Judge Carter commands, her voice resonating with absolute terrifying authority. "Secure the doors to this courtroom immediately. Nobody leaves." Two armed federal bailiffs immediately step in front of the heavy oak double doors at the back of the room, crossing their arms and blocking the only exit. Judge Carter slowly stands up from her leather chair. She looks down at the defense table with a gaze so severe it feels like physical pressure. The lead defense attorney has pushed his chair as far away from Trevor as physically possible. Jasmine is shrinking into herself, trembling uncontrollably. Brenda is clutching Jerome's arm, her perfectly styled hair falling into her face as she begins to hyperventilate. "I have sat on this federal bench for 22 years. Judge Carter begins, her voice echoing with lethal precision. "I have presided over cases involving cartels, organized crime syndicates, and massive corporate embezzlement. But rarely have I witnessed such a staggering display of moral bankruptcy, familial betrayal, and sheer unfiltered incompetence." She picks up the forged power of attorney document with the tips of her fingers, holding it up as if it is contaminated. "Jerome Wilson," she says, looking directly at my father. "You sat in my courtroom and attempted to utilize a fabricated, backdated legal instrument to justify looting your incapacitated mother's life savings. You conspired to sell your own family's heritage to fund a superficial lifestyle. You are not a businessman. You are a predator." Jerome opens his mouth to speak, but the words die in his throat. He is completely broken, staring straight ahead into the absolute destruction of his fake country club existence. Therefore, Judge Carter continues, her voice ringing out like a death knell for their empire. "I am permanently and immediately revoking this fraudulent power of attorney. It is entirely void. Furthermore, based on the overwhelming medical and forensic evidence presented by the plaintiff, I am granting full, irrevocable legal, financial, and medical guardianship of Ruby Wilson to her granddaughter Maya Wilson. Neither Jerome Wilson, Brenda Wilson, nor any of their associates are permitted within 500 feet of Ruby Wilson or her assets ever again." Brenda lets out a high-pitched, strangled gasp. The oxygen is rapidly leaving her lungs. She clutches her chest, her designer pearls clattering against each other as she realizes the money is gone forever. "But I am not stopping with civil penalties," Judge Carter states, her dark eyes narrowing. She reaches over and picks up the thick stack of forensic flowcharts Elias and I submitted. She taps them against the wood of her bench. "The financial audit provided by Miss Wilson is one of the most thorough forensic takedowns I have ever reviewed," Judge Carter announces. "It explicitly outlines a coordinated multi-person conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and severe elder exploitation. I am officially forwarding every single page of this audit along with the forged notary stamp evidence directly to the United States District Attorney's Office, with my personal recommendation for immediate criminal indictment." The air leaves the defense table completely. The high-priced lawyers are already packing their briefcases. They know a sinking ship when they see one. They will not spend another minute defending a family that just confessed to federal crimes in open court. And finally, Judge Carter says, turning her freezing gaze directly onto Trevor, "Mr. Wilson, you have just spontaneously and voluntarily confessed to defrauding international investors to the tune of $5 million. You have admitted to utilizing illicit funds. You have admitted to executing a fraudulent land transfer." Trevor takes a step backward, his hands raised defensively. "Your Honor, I was just angry," he stammers, his arrogant bravado entirely stripped away, leaving nothing but a terrified, pathetic shell of a man. "I did not mean it. I was just talking." "You were confessing," Judge Carter corrects him sharply. "And you did it on my federal record." She looks past Trevor to the armed bailiffs standing at the perimeter of the room. "Officers," she commands, "detain Mr. Wilson. Take him into federal custody immediately. pending a formal arraignment for wire fraud and conspiracy. Trevor's eyes go wide with absolute terror. The bailiffs step forward, moving with swift professional efficiency. They unclip their handcuffs. Jasmine leaps up from her chair. The reality of her lavish life completely evaporating hits her all at once. If Trevor goes to prison, her designer bags, her mansions, and her luxury cars go with him. She reaches out, grabbing Trevor's arm with both hands, tears streaming down her face. "Trevor, please," she sobs, trying to pull him back. "You cannot leave me. What am I supposed to do? You have to fix this. Tell them it was a mistake." Trevor looks at the wife he financed with stolen money. He sees the bailiffs closing in. The sheer panic fractures whatever facade of love he had left. He realizes that Jasmine's greed and her father's lies are the exact reason he is about to be placed in federal handcuffs. He violently yanks his arm away, shoving Jasmine back so hard she stumbles against the defense table. "Get off me!" Trevor snarls, his face contorted with pure malice. "You and your psychotic family dragged me into this. You spent the money just as fast as I did. Do not touch me." The bailiffs grab Trevor by the shoulders, spinning him around and snapping the heavy steel cuffs onto his wrists. The sharp metallic click echoes through the silent courtroom. Court is adjourned, Judge Carter announces, striking her gavel one final time. She stands up and walks off the bench, leaving the courtroom in a state of absolute irrevocable ruin. I remain standing at the plaintiff's table. Elias quietly begins packing up our legal pads. I look across the room at the smoldering wreckage of my family. Trevor is being marched out a side door in handcuffs, his head hung low. Jasmine is slumped against the table, weeping hysterically, her perfect makeup ruined. Brenda is leaning against Jerome, crying uncontrollably, as Jerome stares blankly at the floor, finally realizing that the facade is over. I reach down, pick up my leather bag, and turn my back on them. I walk down the center aisle of the courtroom, my footsteps steady and calm. I do not look back. The heavy oak doors of courtroom 4B slam shut behind Elias and me, slightly muting the chaotic shouting that has entirely consumed the federal gallery. I step out into the sprawling, polished marble hallway of the courthouse. The air out here is cool and sterile. I take a slow, deep breath, feeling the residual adrenaline slowly draining from my system. Elias stands beside me, quietly slipping his legal pad into his leather briefcase. He gives me a single respectful nod. We do not need to celebrate. The absolute devastation we just delivered speaks entirely for itself. Less than 30 seconds later, the courtroom doors burst open with a violent crash. Trevor is marched out into the hallway, his arms secured firmly behind his back in heavy steel handcuffs. He is flanked by two massive federal marshals. His custom-tailored Italian suit is rumpled, his tie is askew, and his face is a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. Jasmine stumbles out of the courtroom directly behind him. She is completely hysterical, her expensive designer heels clicking frantically against the marble floor as she tries to keep up with the marshals. Her perfect blowout is ruined. Her mascara is running down her cheeks in dark, messy streaks, and she is clutching her luxury handbag to her chest like a shield. Trevor, Jasmine screams, her voice echoing shrilly down the long, cavernous corridor. "Trevor, you have to tell them. You have to tell them I did not know anything about the foreign investors. Tell them I had nothing to do with the real estate firm." Trevor stops dead in his tracks. The federal marshals halt beside him, their expressions completely stony. Trevor turns his head and looks at his wife. The man who spent the last 5 years projecting an aura of untouchable elite wealth is entirely gone. In his place is a desperate cornered animal, willing to chew off its own leg to escape a trap. "You had nothing to do with it." Trevor spits, his voice laced with absolute venomous malice. "You spent every single dime I brought home, Jasmine. You knew exactly where that money was coming from. You managed the offshore transfers for the Buckhead dealership. You authorized the wire payments for your own credit cards." Jasmine physically recoils, her face draining of all remaining color. Her mouth opens, but only a dry, terrified gasp comes out. She realizes in real time that the man she married for money and status is about to trade her freedom for a lighter prison sentence. "I am not taking the fall for your family's psychopathic greed," Trevor snarls, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. He turns to the federal marshal standing to his right. Officer, I have full digital records of my wife authorizing illegal wire transfers across state lines. I have text messages proving she knew the funds were illegally sourced from her grandmother's accounts. I want to speak to the district attorney right now. I am formally filing for divorce and I am turning over every single piece of financial evidence I have on her and her father. Jasmine lets out a sound that is barely human, a high, strangled shriek of absolute despair. Her knees give out. She collapses against the cold marble wall, sliding down until she hits the floor, burying her face in her hands as she hyperventilates. She has no husband, she has no money. Her assets are entirely frozen, and she is now a prime suspect in a massive federal conspiracy case. Her fake glamorous empire has just been incinerated. The marshals pull Trevor forward, marching him toward the secure elevator bay. Jasmine does not even try to follow him. She just sits on the floor, weeping hysterically into her designer bag. The courtroom doors open one more time. Jerome and Brenda walk out. Jerome looks like a ghost. His arrogant posture has completely collapsed. His shoulders are slumped. His eyes are vacant, and he is staring blankly at the marble floor. He looks like a man who has just been handed a terminal diagnosis. He knows his life is over. He knows the country club will publicly expel him. He knows his golf buddies will cut all ties. He knows he is going to spend the twilight years of his life sitting in a federal penitentiary. Brenda walks beside him, her entire body shaking. She looks up and sees me standing calmly by the public elevators with Elias. A wild, desperate light ignites in my mother's eyes. She abandons her husband in the middle of the hallway. She practically sprints across the marble floor toward me, her arms outstretched. Elias steps forward to block her, but I hold up a single hand, signaling him to let her speak. I want to hear exactly what she has to say. Maya Brenda gasps, closing the distance between us. She reaches out and grabs the sleeve of my blazer with both hands. Her grip is tight, frantic, and clawing. The heavy scent of her expensive floral perfume mixes with the sharp, sour smell of nervous sweat. Maya, please! She begs, her voice cracking as genuine ugly tears spill out of her eyes. You have to stop this. You have to call the judge and tell her we can settle this privately. You have to tell the district attorney not to file criminal charges. I stand perfectly still. I do not pull my arm away. I simply look down at her hands clutching my sleeve, and then I look into her eyes. My face is entirely devoid of emotion. I am a block of solid ice. They are going to take everything. Brenda sobs, her voice dropping to a pathetic, high-pitched whine. The federal forfeiture clause means they are going to seize the house, Maya. They are taking the cars. They are taking my retirement portfolios to pay back the restitution to Ruby. I will have nothing. I will be homeless. I cannot live in a cheap apartment. I cannot be seen like that. My friends will laugh at me. They will completely destroy me. We are your parents, Maya. You cannot do this to your own family. Please, I am begging you. We are your parents. She is crying so hard she can barely draw a full breath. She is completely shattered. She expects me to feel sympathy. She expects the lifelong conditioning of a daughter craving her mother's love to finally kick in and save her. I look at my mother, then I look past her to where my father is standing paralyzed in the hallway, and finally down to my sister, who is still sobbing on the floor. You told me to wait at the airport because you would be right back, I say. My voice is low, quiet, and completely merciless. The words hit Brenda like a physical blow. Her crying abruptly stops. She stares up at me, her eyes wide with sudden terrifying realization. She remembers the cold airport terminal. She remembers abandoning a sick, confused woman and a daughter she despised just so she could go on a luxury vacation paid for with stolen money. You told me to wait. I repeat, keeping my gaze locked onto hers. Now you can wait for my pity. But I am never coming back. I deliberately reach down and peel her fingers off the sleeve of my jacket one by one. I let her hand drop to her side. I turn my back on her and press the call button for the elevator. The silver doors slide open instantly with a soft, pleasant chime. I step inside. Elias steps in right behind me. Brenda just stands there completely frozen in the middle of the hallway. She does not scream. She does not try to follow me. She simply stares at me in absolute horrifying silence as the reality of her total destruction finally takes hold. The elevator doors slowly slide shut, severing my line of sight, leaving them sobbing in the hallway surrounded by police officers waiting to take their official statements. 6 months later, the warm golden afternoon sun filters through the ancient towering oak trees, casting long, peaceful shadows across the sprawling wrap-around porch of our Georgia heritage farm. The air out here is different. It smells like pine needles, sweet tea, and rich turned earth. It smells like home. I am sitting on a heavy wooden bench on the porch, a sleek tablet resting on my lap. Right next to me, Grandma Ruby is settled comfortably in a cushioned rocking chair. She is wrapped in a soft, handmade quilt, her silver hair brushed neatly back. Today is a very good day. The rapid progression of her dementia seems to pause on the farm. The familiar sounds of the crickets, the gentle rustle of the wind through the tall grass, and the solid, undeniable presence of the land keep her grounded. She smiles warmly, looking out over the dozens of acres of deep green fields that our ancestors cleared, planted, and bled for. The land is completely secure. It is permanently protected. It will never be threatened by concrete bulldozers or greedy developers ever again. I reach out and gently squeeze her hand. She squeezes back her grip surprisingly strong. I look back down at the glowing screen of my tablet. My forensic accounting firm is no longer operating out of a cramped high-security office building in downtown Atlanta. I relocated my entire operation. I spent the last few months fully renovating the interior of the massive historic farmhouse. I converted the entire East Wing into a state-of-the-art, highly encrypted digital workspace. I have gigabit fiber optic cables running directly into a rustic wood-paneled room, equipped with multiple server racks and a massive command desk. My business has absolutely exploded. The news of how I systematically dismantled a multi-million-dollar corporate fraud ring and took down my own corrupt family spread like wildfire through the legal and financial sectors. I no longer have to search for clients. They come to me. I now specialize exclusively in taking cases for individuals and families who have been targeted by financial predators, corporate embezzlers, and white-collar thieves. I am running a highly successful, deeply fulfilling empire directly from the very land my parents tried to steal. I tap the screen opening the federal court docket portal. I check the latest updates on the Wilson conspiracy case. The wheels of federal justice grind slowly, but they grind incredibly fine. Jerome and Trevor have both been officially and formally indicted by the United States Department of Justice. They were denied bail due to their extreme flight risk and their proven history of international wire fraud. They have been sitting in a federal holding facility for the last 6 months, awaiting a trial that they are mathematically guaranteed to lose. The district attorney has charged them with 12 counts of felony wire fraud, severe elder exploitation, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and municipal forgery. They are both looking at a minimum of 20 years behind bars. Trevor's offshore investors also filed a massive civil suit against him, ensuring that even if he ever gets out of prison, his wages will be garnished until the day he dies. I swipe to the next page of the docket, pulling up the asset forfeiture reports. Jasmine tried to fight the federal seizure, but she failed completely. Because her lifestyle was entirely funded by the money Trevor stole from Ruby, the government stripped her bare. They seized the sprawling suburban mansion. They impounded her luxury SUVs. They literally walked into her home and confiscated her designer handbags, her expensive jewelry, and her collection of imported shoes to auction off for restitution. She was left with absolutely nothing. According to the latest deposition files, she is currently renting a single room in a sketchy part of town. She is working a minimum wage retail job at a local shopping mall, spending 8 hours a day folding the exact same brand of designer clothes she used to arrogantly flaunt at the country club. She has been entirely stripped of her status, forced to live in the reality she always thought she was too good for. And Brenda. I read the final summary on my mother's current living situation. The IRS and the federal courts seized the Fairfield estate to cover the remaining balance of the stolen $400,000. The country club immediately and publicly revoked her membership, completely blacklisting her from the elite social circles she worshipped. She is currently living alone in a cramped, tiny one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. She has no car, no husband, and no friends. She spends her days sitting in a cheap linoleum kitchen, completely alienated from the world, clutching the fake pearls of a life that was always an illusion. I close the court portal. I power down the tablet and set it aside on the small wooden table next to my bench. I lean back, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the deep, profound peace of the farm wash over me. I take a deep breath of the fresh, clean Georgia air. There is no anxiety left in my chest. There is no lingering desire for approval from people who are entirely incapable of love. I open my eyes and look out over the sprawling green fields, watching a pair of bluebirds dive and swoop over the tall grass. I hold my grandmother's hand in the quiet warmth of the afternoon. My family tried to throw us away. They tried to erase our history for a quick payout. They tried to sell our legacy to the highest bidder, but instead they lost absolutely everything: their freedom, their money, and their pride. And we kept the only thing that truly mattered. We kept our home. The greatest takeaway from these experiences is that your worth is never defined by those who refuse to see it. Blood does not automatically equal family, and loyalty should never require the sacrifice of your own dignity. When you stop seeking validation from toxic environments and start investing in your own potential, you permanently strip away their power. True strength lies in walking away from tables where respect is no longer served. You do not need to prove your value to people committed to misunderstanding you. Simply build your own empire in silence. Share your story of overcoming toxic relationships in the comments below, and hit subscribe for more empowering journeys of self-discovery.